Reforming health care in this country was another issue today at President Clinton's news conference. The president said that he will not ask the American people to pay higher taxes until health care providers, as he put it, give back some of the money that they'll make from these health care reforms. There's a medical breakthrough tonight. The discovery of the gene that causes Huntington's disease. That's a progressive and often fatal affliction that is hereditary. Some 30,000 Americans have it. 5 times that number carry the gene and they're at risk. More now from NBC Science correspondent Robert Bazell.
Michael Garris and Donna Reed have Huntington's disease. It often starts late in life and slowly destroys a person, physically and mentally.
You ain't got the do-re-mi.
Folk singer Woody Guthrie, Arlo's father, was probably the best-known victim. The search for the gene has been an extraordinary 10-year collaboration by researchers across the U.S. and around the world.
This is a great day. We should all feel wonderful about this day. People have compared the Huntington's gene to the big fish that keeps getting away. Well, darn it, we caught the thing this time.
Dr. Nancy Wexler, whose mother died of Huntington's and is at risk herself, helped organize the scientific effort. She also worked for years in certain villages in Venezuela, where a few large interrelated families have an enormously high incidence of Huntington's disease.
The Venezuelan families were essential. Without the Venezuelan families, we wouldn't have the gene today.
The immediate consequence of the discovery of the gene will be a more accurate test to identify people who carry it. A far more important consequence of the discovery is that it gives scientists tools to learn to treat the disease.
It opens up a vista of a cure that we dreamed about, but this actually makes it possible.
And that means hope for all the people around the world who carry the deadly gene. Robert Bazell, NBC News, Boston.
The new Attorney General, Janet Reno, today asked for the resignations from all U.S. attorneys held over from the Bush administration to clear the way for Clinton nominees. Some Republicans are warning tonight that could interfere with investigations, such as the one into Democratic House Ways and Means Chairman Dan Rostenkowski, but Reno said there is no connection. President Clinton remains committed to admitting gays to military service in this country, but the opposition remains fierce, and Clinton today left open the possibility of restricting the kinds of assignments that gays might draw once they're in the military. More now from NBC's Jim Miklaszewski.
Clinton aides say the issue hit home during a recent tour aboard the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt. Clinton was struck by the close quarters and contact sailors are forced to endure for months at a time. Asked today if he'd support a ban against gays at sea or in combat, Clinton wouldn't rule it out.
I would think you could make appropriate distinctions on duty assignments once they're in.
Senate Armed Services Chairman Sam Nunn is opposed to gays in the military, but warns that restrictions could be unconstitutional.
This whole area is fraught with a lot of legal implications, and I think that would have to be carefully examined.
Clinton disagrees.
The courts have historically given quite wide berth to the military to make judgments of that kind in terms of duty assignments.
But gay rights groups were immediately up in arms.
Segregation is never appropriate. Discrimination is discrimination is discrimination.
No combat or sea duty could deny gays military promotions. It's the same battle women in the military have been fighting for years.
I think it's really crazy to say, well, we'll let them in, but we won't let them fully participate. I don't get that distinction at all.
Senate hearings begin Monday, but the administration still hasn't named its task force to come up with a policy on gays in the military.
So even after this issue blew up in their faces last January, the White House still hasn't figured out how to handle it. Jim Miklaszewski, NBC News, the White House.
At the UN tonight, the Serbian delegation withdrew from those peace talks to end the fighting in Bosnia. The mediator, Lord Owen of Great Britain, says the Serbs rejected a key proposal to divide Bosnia among the warring factions. Commentary now from John Chancellor, and like the rest of us, he's looking at that situation in Moscow. John?
Tom, when you add up the pros and cons of the president's policy of building what he calls a partnership with Boris Yeltsin, there are more things against it than for it. When Yeltsin leaves Russia to meet with Mr. Clinton, nobody knows if his political opponents will let him back in. 3 days ago, Yeltsin assumed emergency presidential powers, but nobody knows what those powers will be. Even without the details, the idea of a strong president in the Kremlin has frightened some of the smaller republics within the Russian nation. Yeltsin said he will ask the people of Russia to approve a new constitution and give him a vote of confidence, but nobody knows how the voting will be arranged, an important legal question. Nobody knows how many people will vote. A Moscow poll which came out today gave Yeltsin considerable support, but 7 out of 10 Russians say politics is irrelevant, according to another poll. Betting on a Russian leader can be dangerous. President Bush stuck with Gorbachev for too long and was criticized for that by Bill Clinton. Now, President Clinton says Yeltsin is the only game in town. Henry Kissinger, who knows about these things, says he would personally prefer Yeltsin, but Kissinger also says we need to support someone who can stay in office through his own efforts, not with foreign help. If Yeltsin falls, the United States will have to deal with the people who kicked him out. This is a very tricky situation. Tom?
Thank you, John. On Wall Street today, the Dow dipped just a bit in heavy trading today. Until one day last fall, Dennis Byrd of the New York Jets was a little-known defensive lineman, a strapping 26-year-old out of a small Oklahoma town, loved by his teammates for his generous manner and his positive attitude. And then suddenly, Byrd was a national story, a tragedy. Well, now, he has another story to tell. It was November 29th. The Jets were playing the Kansas City Chiefs. With 23 seconds gone in the third quarter, Dennis Byrd, number 90, charged into the Kansas City backfield and crashed into a teammate. Routine violence for the NFL, but for Dennis Byrd, this was no ordinary collision.
I started to get up and I felt something in my neck crunch. It wasn't right. I laid my head back down and tried to unbuckle my helmet, and my arms weren't working. My right hand just kind of fell up towards my helmet. And then Kyle Clifton, he's our linebacker and a good friend of mine, he stepped over me and said, "Come on, get up."
He looked right up at me and he said, "Kyle, I'm paralyzed." And I was nearly devastated at that point, but I said, "No, you're all right, Dennis, you're all right." Then he said, "No," he goes, "I can't move my legs."
3 days later, after a 7-hour operation, doctors were not sure Byrd would ever regain the use of his arms or legs.
The long-term prognosis has not changed. The overall amount of improvement that may occur will take some time to determine.
Voracious, yeah.
But now, less than 6 months later, Dennis Byrd is back home in Oklahoma, and he's walking. It was a brilliant piece of surgery, but most of all, it was the bulldog determination of Dennis Byrd.
Was there ever a moment when, despite your public proclamations that you were going to walk again, when you had private doubts?
That's whenever I had to rely on my faith in God that I've always used as my foundation to help pull myself out of those doubts and out of those troubling times.
Now, do you want me to drive?
If you'd
like to.
Yeah, very well.
Great. 3 times a week, he drives himself to Tulsa for physical therapy, pursuing his goal of complete recovery.
Stay on it, stay on it. Good.
Everybody tells me that what's happened is miraculous.
Much better.
You know, the walking, the strengthening, everything. I'm struggling to gain more, you know, every day. And the more you get back, the more you want back.
Doctors say Byrd has regained strength in virtually every muscle that used to be paralyzed, but the right side of his body still is stronger than the left.
So many things came easily, so many things came gracefully.
Great.
And then all at once, it ends.
I want you to resist against me.
Yeah. I've got to teach my left hand to do the things that it used to do. I'm just starting over.
One of Byrd's goals is to turn his personal tragedy into a public good. With his attorney, Rick Schaefer, Byrd is starting a foundation to provide summer camps for children in wheelchairs.
How old are we? 2 years old. Mm-hmm. The things to me that I wanted back so dearly was to hold my daughter and to kiss my wife. Hey. Those things were really what was at the heart of my recovery.
You really think you'll be jogging before too long?
Yeah, I certainly do. I think the biggest thing I was looking for is somebody to tell me that I couldn't do that so I could prove them wrong.
All right, you can't jog.
Well, we've got it on tape, so I'll get to prove you wrong.
Okay.
Bird's injury was very serious, but he was lucky it was a deep contusion, not a break of the spinal column. In many, that still would have led to paralysis, but Bird simply refused to accept the possibility. Nice guys still finish first occasionally. That's Nightly News for Tuesday. I'm Tom Brokaw. See you tomorrow night.